So I'm making Sunday dinner, and tonight's menu includes some fresh pork chops, and these are chops that I got on sale at Kroger. They are 3 thick cut chops. They were on sale for $5.84, so I pulled them out of the freezer for today's dinner. And since they are thick cut, to make this meal a little bit more budget friendly, the 2 larger ones I'm going to cut in half so that there's 5 pieces instead of 3. And then the star of the meal is going to be this cabbage. I got this cabbage in one of my previous grocery hauls, and now it's time to cook it. You can see it's starting to get a little worse for wear around the edges, so it's definitely time for me to cook it. I also needed some chicken broth that I got out of my freezer, and I also needed some bacon, which I got on a previous grocery haul, and I mentioned that I was going to make some fried cabbage with it. So I'm going to get the cabbage made first so I can get it done, and then just have it sitting off to the side warming while I get the chops ready. And then I'm thinking we've got some mashed potatoes that I made the other day that I've got in the freezer, and I'll get those mashed potatoes out, and we'll have some mashed potatoes with gravy to go along with that. So let's get this started. Gonna put this chicken broth in the microwave so it can thaw out. And then I'll get this cabbage washed and then cut. I'll peel and discard the outer leaves, then give it a good rinse. Then I'll remove the core, and it's always a bit tricky cutting all the way through the cabbage to get to the core. It's easier once I quarter it, then I can get to the core without too much trouble. Now I discard the core as well as the outer leaves. If you save yours and do something amazing with it, let me know in the comment section. I am trying to be a better steward of my resources, but I have not figured out a use for the outer cabbage leaves and the core. Once the core is removed, I cut the cabbage into bite-sized pieces. And you'll notice I still have a good mix of the green leaves and the white inner leaves. That way, when the cabbage is cooked, I can have just a little bit of crunch. I don't like mushy cabbage. Now that the cabbage is cut, I'll start my bacon. I took 3 slices and cut them in half so they would fit into my skillet. I brown them until crisp, then remove the bacon to drain on a paper towel. I poured off the bacon grease into a bowl so I'd have it to use later when frying the cabbage. But in the meantime, I added the cabbage to the skillet and gave it a good toss. I wanted as much of it as possible to be coated with the bacon grease. And notice how small the cabbage pieces are. I did need to add a bit more bacon grease once the cabbage started to cook down. I did sprinkle in a little black pepper, no salt, just a little black pepper, and about a half a cup of chicken broth. I'll probably add some more pepper later, and I'll add the salt later. But right now, I just wanted to add the black pepper and the chicken broth. The chicken broth adds some flavor and it helps to tenderize the cabbage. Then I covered it and let it cook. I want the cabbage to soften up, but I don't want it to turn to mush, so I am careful to keep an eye on it. Once it's the texture that I like, I'll toss the cabbage in about 2 teaspoons of butter. Once that's done, I'll crumble up the bacon and add it to the cabbage. I'll give that a good stir and then add in the salt and any other seasonings I choose. And here's a pro tip. Add the salt sparingly because once it's in, you can't take it out. However, you can always add more later if you need it. So I'll give that cabbage a good toss, cover it, and then set it off the heat. This video is brought to you by Aprondiva. Pretty and practical, we believe that an apron can be a homemaker's best accessory. Visit us at www.aprondiva.com. Now it's time to prepare my chops, and I'm going to start by cutting them in half. But first I need to put a damp towel underneath my cutting board to keep it from moving around. Once I get that tricky business out of the way, I put a piece of wax paper on the counter, and then I pour about a half cup of flour, some Shout's country seasoning, and a little of Miss Leona's house seasoning, and give it a good stir. Miss Leona's seasoning can be a bit spicy, so I use just a little bit. Then I dredge the chops in the flour mixture, then put them in the skillet to brown. And I've got some butter in that skillet, so I'm going to brown those chops in the butter. It takes 2 or 3 minutes on each side, and then once the chops are lightly browned, I'll add more butter to the skillet, and the butter just helps those chops to be a beautiful golden brown. And notice I am constantly scraping the bottom of the pan so the chops don't stick. Once they're as brown as I want them, I'll cover them and let them cook for about another 5 minutes. Then it'll be time to make the gravy. I start by adding some sliced onion to the top of the chops and letting them simmer for about 10 minutes. Then I remove the chops to a plate. I continue to scrape and stir the bottom of the pan. Then I'll make a simple roux with a little flour and water. I add this to the pan gravy. Again, continually giving it a good scrape and stirring, and add my seasoning. And I season the gravy to my family's liking. You season the gravy to your family's liking. Once the gravy is made, I return the chops to the pan, and then I make sure to cover the chops with the gravy. Then I put a lid over the pan and set it off the heat. Now it's time to get ready to plate it up. I got the mashed potatoes out of the freezer and heated them in the microwave off camera. I put a dollop or 2 of gravy on the potatoes, a little on the chops, and we were ready for dinner. Now it's time for the after dinner cleanup, and everybody helps. Right now, the everybody is me and the hubby. I wish this was a habit I had started when my children were home. It would certainly have sped things up and would have taught them much about working together in the kitchen. you will have noticed that he did clean the sink. However, it's not the way I like to leave the sink at night. So I'll give it a good wipe down and then lay out a fresh dishcloth and dish towel. So my after dinner cleanup is all done, and as you saw, I had help. My husband is so good at helping to wash the dishes and participate in the after dinner cleanup, which is just so helpful. One of the things that I also do when I am working in the kitchen is I will listen to something on my Kindle, and today's story was Hideaway by Nora Roberts. It's a really good story, so I'm listening to that. And then let me just show you again some of my all-time favorite storage containers. So for dinner, I had the leftover chops and gravy, and there in this one, there's enough chops left over for another meal. So maybe we'll have this meal on Tuesday or Wednesday. Well, not Tuesday, because Tuesday's Taco Tuesday. So probably Wednesday or Thursday, we can have the chop meal again. There's mashed potatoes here. And this is the cabbage, and there's enough for another meal there. And of course, this is my cranberry sauce. So I've got enough of everything from today's Sunday dinner to have on Thursday, later this week. And those chops, as I showed you earlier, they were almost $6. And since I cut them in half, that gave me 6 pieces. So it was a pretty budget-friendly meal. And then as far as the gravy that I make, whereas I used to buy the Heinz gravy all the time, I'm trying to now make my own each time, because again, I can make gravy with my own flour, chicken broth, and spices, and save that $2 or $3 in the grocery store and use it on something else. For more budget-friendly meals, click this video next.